you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. A people without knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. Men who are earnest, but not afraid of their consequences. They try to put my soul in a black hole, but didn't realize this melanin is gold. That's why I shine with this little light of mine.
All right. You're now tuned into Civics for the Culture, hosted by me, Bennie, aka Poeticlee Williams III, and we're here today to talk about Jim Crow etiquette. However, remember, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician, but I'm someone that's just like you, that's has access to information, resource, and research information so that we can become more knowledgeable, we can become more educated, we can strategize, and we can really learn this system that we're in, this government system that we're in, this system, systematic racism that is around us, prejudice, the different prejudice that happen. Got you tongue-tied. But also just be aware for whatever oppression you may be going through, and understanding why that is happening, understand the behavior behind it. Sometimes it's more than just laws, sometimes it's more than just policies. It's a learned behavior. It's a passed down ideology of how you should act, how you should talk to someone. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today. On Civics for the Culture, it's about it's understanding this game we're in, and understanding our role, so we can kind of strategize and really make some things happen the way we want to see them happen when it comes to justice, when it comes to equity for people that are oppressed. I don't really say equality much, because it's hard. That doesn't seem that isn't real when you already start off uneven. And if inequality, for that to happen, means that we're both going to be put on this balanced playing field. However, you already have a system set up. Now, you just don't delete equality. You know what I'm saying? You just don't delete privilege. That's something that just isn't deleted. You have to implement equity. But that's a whole nother show. What I wanted to get straight into today was the Jim Crow etiquette, really. And yes, Jim Crow laws were that man, when you talk about racial segregation, that's what came to be known as the Jim Crow laws, which were many laws defined to segregate black people and white people in public places and public spaces, and also just pretty much laws that gave this straight up tone of who's superior and who's not superior, right? And so when you have these different laws of, hey, you can't use this water fountain, hey, you can't play in this park, hey, you can't do this, it creates a certain ideology of a behavior and mindset of who is better, who's more righteous, and who is really here to have all the privilege. And I want to talk about that etiquette, and I want to talk about that behavior, because what I thought was interesting, I'm gonna go over some of the etiquette right here, which I'm going to read from ferris.edu, which they had a great article written, and that's what I'm going to be reading from. The Jim Crow Museum right here on Ferris State University. They have a great article written which goes into the Jim Crow etiquette norms. So here's some of the norms right here. The Jim Crow etiquette norms. A black male could not offer his hand to shake hands with a white male because it implied excuse me. Is not, trust me, it's not Rona. It's just this room is super cold. All right, so let me restart. A black male could not offer his hand to shake hands with a white male because it implied being socially equal. Obviously, a black male could not offer his hand to any other part of his body to a white woman because he risked being accused of rape. Another etiquette norm: blacks and whites were not supposed to eat together. If they did eat together, Whites were to be served first, and some sort of partition was to be placed between them. Another one. Under no circumstance was a black male to offer to light a cigarette of a white female. That gesture implied intimacy. So if I offer, hey man, let me light your cigarette, it implies I want to be intimate with you. Another one. Blacks were not allowed to show public affection towards one another in public, especially kissing, because it offended whites. And I want to stop at that one. Man, these when I'm reading over some of these etiquette norms, right? And these were heavy in the South. However, some states like Alabama and I believe Mississippi, I know Alabama for sure, but I want to say Mississippi, however, they really didn't even need to enforce Jim Crow laws because it was such an understanding that, hey, this is the fixed norm, you know? And you start to see how that passes down through generations and how we treat each other. You know, one thing I talk about for myself, and I had to learn and break out of that mold, was intimacy of public affection with my black woman, which is key. Like I was growing up and young, because I would not see him, because I had this ideology, you don't do that in public, you know, not just from just don't show PDA, but just you don't do that in public. But it was this toxic thinking, it was this narrative which you don't do it because you don't want to offend somebody. It was this underlying notion that I had in my thought. You don't want to offend, you don't want to offend them. And it's like, wow, you don't realize how these things are ingrained into your mind until you get some understanding and start educating yourself. You're like, wow, I really do that, but why do I do this? Once you start questioning yourself, why do I do this? Why am I not doing this? Why am I not allowed to do this? Why am I not allowed to feel like this? Once you start questioning those, and once you start realizing, okay, there are boundaries on who I'm supposed to be and why and how I'm supposed to move. And if there are boundaries, where is that coming from? Right? Who is the superior in this room to tell me what and what I cannot do, especially if I'm with my woman? Nah, get out of here. Nah, get out of here. Jim Crow etiquette prescribed that blacks were introduced to whites, never whites to blacks. For example, Mr. Peters, the white person, this is Charlie, the black person that I spoke to you about. So let me rewind there so you can understand. Jim Crow etiquette prescribed that blacks were introduced to whites, never whites to blacks. For example, Mr. Peters, the white person, this is Charlie, the black person that I spoke to you about. So you gotta come through here. Say that's why it was always a thing of it's about who you know. You know, a lot of black people try to get in corporate. Oh, if you meet so and so, then they'll talk about you to so and so, and it's like, nah. If I am who I am, I'm going to go talk. No, you don't go and just introduce yourself. You gotta work your way up to speak to them. No, that person is just a person like I am. I can go speak to this person. This is the when you start to really understand this etiquette of thinking, it shows up in so much of life. And if you never experienced some of these things that I'm reading, if you didn't go to a high school, I went to a high school where blacks and whites did not sit together. Not purposefully. It was just something, hey, black people were chilling over here, white people chilling over here, Hispanics chilling over here. But where did that thinking come from? Some could say you're reaching. No, this is etiquette. This is a learned behavior. This is something that really happened. These are facts. It's not just reaching. This facts and stuff passes down through generations of thinking how we should be in behavior. When you see somebody else, if you see your parents doing something, if you see your family, if you see your friends, family doing things, and you're just some things we don't question, especially as children, we don't question. So it becomes a learned behavior that we just carry throughout life. And if that is systematic racism, it's not just, okay, I have a good heart, but it's actually starting to use that mouth. What that mouth do when it comes to racism? What that mouth do when it comes to systematic racism? What does that mouth do when it comes to justice? You know? So this is another one. Whites did not use courtesy titles of respect when referring to blacks. For example, Mr., Miss, or Miss, Sir, or Ma'am. Instead, blacks were called by their first names. Blacks had to use the courtesy titles when referring to whites and were not allowed to call them by their first names. You dare not call William. You dare not call Lorianne. You dare not do it. Why not? Why not? Does it make you feel like now we're now on the same level where I can call you by your first name, to call you by the same name that your parents could call you? That's what it is. I can call you by the same thing that your parents could call you, or someone else above you could call you. That can't happen. And understand that. You wonder, why can't you call somebody by their first name? Isn't it just having courtesy just to call them by Mr., Miss, Sir, or ma'am? No. Especially if they can't do that to me. You see that? If you can't do that to me, then I damn sure can't do that to you. So another one, if a black person rode in a car driven by a white person, the black person sat in the back seat or the back of the truck. One of the things growing up in the South, you always see chilling people, you see black people maybe riding around in the back of the truck or whatnot. And yeah, it's fun, but where does that really come from? I know you have jobs where the white guy be always the driver and the black guy would be the passenger. I've had jobs where, yeah, the white guy's going to drive. But why? The black person can't be trusted to drive? This goes back to the same black quarterback theory versus the white quarterback theory. Who's athletic versus who's a team leader and who's a strategist and who's smart versus who's just athletic and just a great athlete that can run. There's a difference. Learn the wording. Learn the context and learn the context of how something's being used, how you're being used in context. Here's one more. Well, actually several more, but here's another one. While motorists had the right of way at all, white motorists had the right of way at all intersections. This is nuts. White motorists had the right of way at all intersections. White motorists had the rights of way at all intersections. I feel like that is a double entendre. This is the Jim Crow etiquette. So forget about laws. This is an etiquette, right? Which I think is a little bit deeper. Because etiquette, laws, you can kind of change laws, right? Yeah, laws, if there's a sign up says restrooms white only, that's a law. Okay, damn. All right, we get that sign removed. Right? But what about the etiquette? What about the behavior now that's been passed through his son, through his daughter, through the grandson, through the granddaughter, through the cousin, through the nephew, through the niece, coming out the aunt's mouth, coming out the uncle's mouth? What about that right there? Because while you can take down this sign, NASCAR just banned the Confederate flag. While you can ban that Confederate flag, you know what happened? At the next race, there are bunches, hella shops, vendors selling Confederate products and flags right across. So while there's some things we can ban on a piece of paper, the mind is something that's ingrained. Things get ingrained into the mind. Is something that passes on until that is developed and evolved. So until we evolve in this, evolving laws definitely help, but it takes a lot to evolve this. Stetson Kennedy, the author of Jim Crow Guide 1990, offered these simple rules that blacks were supposed to observe in conversing with whites. 1, never assert or even intimidate. Hold on, my screen just went dark. My screen just went dark. Hold on. Let me play this for me. All right. Never one. So Stetson Kennedy, the author of Jim Crow Guide 1990, offered these simple rules that blacks were supposed to observe in conversing with whites. Never assert or even intimate. Is that right? Intimate? Okay. Never assert even, kind of hint to that a white person is lying. You never hint to that a white person is lying. Never impute dishonorable intentions to a white person. Never impute dishonorable intentions to a white person. Never say that white person cheated. Never say that white person did something wrong. Never call out that white person for just their prejudiced thoughts. Never call out that white person for hate crimes. Never call out that white person for doing anything wrong. You never do that. Nothing dishonorable, because the white is right. And that is the etiquette of thinking. White is right. So at no point of what you're doing, you've been trained, you've been taught that whatever you do, you have this privilege. You're right. Number 3, never suggest that a white person is from an inferior class. Never. So while you may have white people that live in trailer parks, while you may have white people that could be homeless, while you may have white people that could, all these different lists of things where their lifestyle could still be quote unquote lower than a black person, is you never suggest that a white person is from an inferior class. So that same white person, you may be living in your big house, but that same white person that's living in a trailer park still has privileges that you can't. While you may be doing your thing, living uptown, living with downtown, wherever, that white person that's homeless, let them get a shower, let them get cleaned up, still got more privilege than you. This is the etiquette of thinking. I'm not telling you something that I'm not just reaching. This is the etiquette of thinking based off laws that were created, based off a system that was created. Jim Crow etiquette. Not just Jim Crow laws, but Jim Crow etiquette. Number 4, never lay claim to or overly demonstrate superior knowledge or intelligence. Never lay claim to or overly demonstrate superior knowledge or intelligence. Damn it, boy, I would be killed right now. You can't, you do not show that you have some kind of smart brain working. This is right here is orchestrated play of not just controlling a group of people, but now controlling generations of how that group thinks, acts, and even just breathes. This is controlling generations of identity stolen. Our identity wasn't just stolen from Africa. Our identity was stolen once we got here, and consistently stolen throughout. And right here, as we see with Jim Crow etiquette, your identity as a black person, you have knowledge within. You have knowledge within that comes from a higher power. You can tap into that. However, if you're kept told that you do not show that you're smart, you do not show that you can be a leader, if you do not show your driven passion, then you suppress all of that. You suppress it all. Number 5, never curse a white person. Damn it. Never curse a white person. You do not say anything. Once again, going back to like number 2, never impute dishonorable intentions to a white person. Number 5, you never curse a white person. These right here are observed behaviors when conversing with the whites right here. In the Jim Crow, not just Jim Crow era, but this is even beyond Jim Crow era. This is a Jim Crow etiquette of thinking that has surpassed Jim Crow era, because that's what happens. You can put up a law, but you can take down the law. You can put up the law on Tuesday and the law can come down on Wednesday, but that mind state has now been ingrained. Once you allow something until it's just dead, it would continue to spread. You never laugh at a white person. Not at them. No. You can laugh with their jokes, sure. Especially if it's about you, but you never laugh at them. That's number 6. Number 7, never comment upon the appearance of a white female. And boy, have we seen that go down the hill so many times. As a black man that's been in the elevator with a group of white women, I'm gonna tell you, it's an eerie feeling. It's a real eerie feeling, and more black men, I think, should speak on it. More people of color should speak on it, because it's a feeling that we go through that others won't really understand, because of the history of hate that's come behind it. Emmett Till. There was just another guy a couple years ago. I had to look that up. But there's been too many cases. So when I talk about the Jim Crow etiquette, I also want to read this right here on by Ronald L.F. Davis from who was at California State University. So let me read this right here. Great response about Jim Crow etiquette. Most Southern white Americans who grew up prior to 1954 expected Black Americans to conduct themselves according to well understood rituals of behavior. This racial etiquette governed the actions, manners, attitudes, and words of all Black people. When in the presence of whites, to violate this racial etiquette placed one's life and the lives of others at risk. To violate this racial etiquette placed one's life and the lives of others in that family at risk. Blacks were expected to refer to white males in positions of authority as boss or captain. Captain, we know that. Captain Crunch. A title of respect that replaced master or master. They really used in slave times. Sometimes the white children of one's white employer or a prominent white person might be called massa to show special respect. If a white person was well known, a Black servant or hired hand or tenant might speak in somewhat intimate terms addressing the white person as Mr. John or Miss Mary. We've heard that. All Black men, on the other hand, were called by their first names or were referred to as boy, uncle, and old man, regardless of their age. If the white person did not personally know a Black person, the term nigger or nigger fellow might be used. In legal cases and the press, Blacks were often referred to by the word Negro with the first name attached, such as Negro Sam. We've heard that. At other times, the term Jack or some common name was universally used in addressing Black men, not known to the white speaker. On the Pullman sleeping cars on trains, for example, all the Black porters answered to the name of boy or simply George. If you haven't seen, there's a movie called, I want to say it's 1,000 Men Named George. I might have that right. Let me look that up real quick. I think it's like 1,000 Men Named George. If I'm not, that made me think of it. Is it that what's called? 10,000 Black Men Named George came out 2002. Definitely watch that. Watch that. Robert Townsend is the director. So watch that. So it just made me think of that real quick. This is interesting. Next paragraph. Whites much prefer to give Blacks honorary titles, such as doctor or professor or reverend, in order to avoid calling them Mr. While the term nigger was universally used, some whites were uncomfortable with it because they knew it was offensive to most Blacks. They knew it was offensive. So what they'd rather do is, let me call him doctor, professor, reverend, and avoid calling him Mr. So as a substitute to the word nigger, because they knew it was too offensive. They knew that something in their heart, they had a heart about that though, a little bit. So as a substitute, the word Negra was often appeared in polite society. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Black women were addressed as auntie or girl. Kind of makes you wonder why we kind of say auntie all the time. Interesting. Under no circumstances would the title Miss or Miss, why they have a title like Miss, be applied. So Black women were addressed as auntie or girl. Under no circumstances would the title Miss or Miss be applied. A holdover from slavery days was the term wench, a term that showed up in legal writings and dispositions in the Jim Crow era. Some educated whites referred to Black women by the words colored ladies. Sometimes just the word lady was used. White women were allowed Black servants and acquaintances to call them by their first names, but with the word Miss attached as a modifier. Miss Ann, Miss Julie, or Miss Scarlet, for example. The practice of addressing blacks by words that denoted disrespect or inferiority reduced the black person to a non-person, especially in newspaper accounts. In reporting incidents involving blacks, the press usually adopted the gender neutral term Negro, thus designating blacks as lifeless and unknown persons. For example, an incident report might read like this: rescuers discovered that 2 women, 3 men, 4 children, and 5 Negroes were killed by the explosion. Damn. Damn. That's all you can really say. Some of these things. It's just damn. This is what we talk about when we say etiquette of training, of thinking, and behavior. If you're reading this, you're developing this idea and you're developing this concept of what's okay, what's allowed, and who is and what is someone. So what are we allowing? What are we saying is okay? Let me just keep reading. In general, blacks and whites could meet and talk on the street almost always. However, the rules of racial etiquette require blacks to be agreeable and non-challenging. You damn sure better not be yelling or just a lot of just animation, even when the white person was mistaken about something. Usually it was expected that blacks would step off the sidewalk when meeting whites or else walk on the other side, on the outer street side of the walk, thereby giving the whites the wall. Yeah, you get off the sidewalk and get on the street. Under no circumstances could a black person assume an air of equality with whites. Black men were expected to remove their caps and hats when talking with the white person. Those whites, moreover, who associated with blacks in a too friendly or casual manner, ran the risk of being called a nigger lover. You better not laugh with me. We better not have a good time. You're a nigger lover. Man, sheesh. Blacks and whites were not expected to eat together in public. It was okay for blacks to enter a restaurant to buy food or to take out or to stand at the end of a lunch counter until their order was taken. Usually they would then leave and wait outside for their food to be brought to them. Some places allow blacks to eat in the kitchen, nor were black customers always allowed to use store implements such as plates or dishes or even boxes. Black customers commonly brought their own tin pails and buckets to be filled. So you can forget about getting a to-go box there. You could forget about that. You better bring your own to-go box. The white owners of clothing stores did not allow blacks to try on clothing as a general rule, fearing that white customers would not buy the clothes worn by African Americans. Some stores did not allow blacks to put on clothing over their own clothes, to try on hats over a cloth scarf, cloth scarf or their heads on their heads. I got tongue twisted. Some stores did not allow blacks to put on clothing over their own clothes or to try on hats over a cloth scarf on their heads. Shoes were never tried on as a general rule, but most white clerks did allow exact measurements to be made. In most towns, black customers knew which stores could be expected to treat them with respect while not breaking the rules of racial etiquette. So it's like, yeah, I'll break you off, but hey, you know the rules a little bit. Many public places, parks, entertainment centers excluded blacks altogether after 1890, frequently by law, if not by custom. Signs were often posted equating blacks with animals. Negroes and dogs not allowed. Well, I'll be damned. In some communities, blacks could not attend public performances, but only using separate entrances in the back or via alley. So in some communities, blacks could attend. Excuse me, I read that wrong. In some communities, blacks could attend public performances, but only using separate entrances in the back or via an alley. In public halls, theaters, movie houses, they always sat upstairs in the so-called nigger heaven, a buzzard roost. Damn, these some names. I'm getting tripped up reading because it's like you're reading these things. It's like, damn, this is real life. This is real life. You know, this is some things I've read before, it's just when you're reminded and some things are pointing out, it's like, oh, man, how can you not want to fight for justice? How can you not want to fight for justice? Even in the annual state fairs would have a colored day, allowing the black population to attend only on that specific day. Only on that day, which they probably made some kind of rules and strict up way too, where they probably couldn't leave work too. I wouldn't be surprised. Law rather than custom separate the races in public transportation, but local habits of racial etiquette usually determine how the statuses were implemented. Some towns and municipalities, put blacks in the rear of the streetcars, while others require them up front where they could be watched by the car's operator. Custom did not allow motormen or conductors to assist black women with bags or parcels. Damn. Custom did not allow motormen or conductors to assist our black queens with their bags or parcels. Some municipal codes require blacks to be seated from the front to the rear, while others allow blacks to sit anywhere they wanted in the black section. In general, it was expected that blacks would give up their seats while white passengers during the peak or crowded times. And we know about the Rosa Parks story. A little bit, couple more paragraphs right here. Some towns require separate entrances to public buildings, with blacks using one entry and whites another. In most cases, white clerks in stores and ticket stands will always serve white customers first, although no state or municipal law required this practice. Signs in the black section of waiting rooms at train stations, for example, customarily warned against loafing, spitting, and unacceptable behavior. No such signs were usually displayed in the white sections, nor did blacks generally eat in the dining cars on trains, and if they were allowed to eat there, a drawn curtain separated the one or two colored tables from the rest of the car. These rules did not make exceptions, however, for black nurses and nannies who were dang, I got tongue tied. White children or elderly people on trains and streetcars. So these rules did not make exceptions. However, for black nurses and nannies that were with white children or elderly white people on trains and streetcars, they could be outside the one or two colored tables. The color line and the codes of racial etiquette were also strictly observed in public hospitals, with separate wards for whites and blacks. Black nurses were allowed to minister to whites, but not the other way around. If a black person needed an ambulance, for example, a private black-owned and operated wagon or auto would have to be obtained. Why don't we have that now? We need more of that now. No exceptions were allowed, no matter the extent or of the injury or emergency. A similar Jim Crow code of conduct applied to even the U.S. Army. It was not until Eleanor Roosevelt intervened in World War II that black nurses were allowed to care for white soldiers. Let me read that again. A similar Jim Crow code of conduct applied even in the U.S. Army. It was not until Eleanor Roosevelt intervened in World War II that black nurses were allowed to care for white soldiers. So you're a nurse. Yeah. Even though a serious shortage of nurses existed. So it wasn't until Eleanor Roosevelt intervened in World War II that black nurses were allowed to even care for white soldiers. Here they are, white soldiers hurt, damaged, injured, no matter what. Even though it's a shortage of nurses existed, it wasn't until that point that, hey, yes, okay, you actually know what you're doing. You can help them. We know that you're not going to kill them, even though you're a nurse in the Army. The black nurses were used prior to Roosevelt's intervention to attend to German prisoners of war rather than U.S. soldiers. They'd rather have you work on prisoners of war than your own soldiers. What is that telling you? What is that showing you right there? We're talking about Jim Crow etiquette and behavior thinking that's then passed down. What is that showing you? If you're a soldier, U.S. soldier, and you see that, you come back home and you're not letting You're not going letting a black nurse touch you. Why? Because what has been set up. The whole intent of Jim Crow etiquette boiled down to one simple rule. Blacks must demonstrate their inferiority to whites by actions, words, and manners. Laws supported this racist code of behavior whenever racial customs started to weaken or break down in practice, as they did during the Reconstruction era. When the laws were weakly or slowly applied, whites resorted to violence against blacks to reinforce the customs and standards of behavior. Indeed, whites commonly justified lynchings and horrible murders of blacks during the Jim Crow era as defensive actions taken in response to black violations of the color line and rules of racial etiquette. And that is the Jim Crow etiquette. That is the behavior that we must end. That is the behavior that we must evolve from. Black people, white people, everybody. Because there's some things that as black people, we've now become accustomed to within ourselves because of this behavior of thinking. Just as early as I was telling you about how treating our queens in public, talking to white men. Don't feel scared, brother. Say what you got to say. Look him in the eyes. Don't lower your tone. Keep your tone strong. Keep it bold. To men and to my black women. Know who you are, be strong in who you are, and stand tall being who you are. This is Civics for the Culture, talking about Jim Crow etiquette. I'm your host, Bennie, aka Poeticlee Williams. And look here, let's rise up. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician, but I'm someone just like you that can have access to information, to enlighten, to rise up, to be smart and strategize in the system. All right. Let's stay positive, baby. Let's go.